morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. This is George Anastasopoulos, and we are together once again for one of our monthly webinars. Today's presentation has the title Beyond Accreditation, Understanding the Cost of Quality in Conformity Assessment Bodies. Before we start, for the new friends that are joining us, let me introduce myself first. I am the PJLA Technical and International Business Development Manager working in the accreditation field for more than 20 years now. And I work for PJLA, Perry Johnson Laboratory Accreditation, a third-party accreditation body established in United States 1999 and headquartered in Troy, Michigan. PJLA has more than 2,300 accreditations globally in 32 countries, covering all over the world, all the regions of the world, and in many different programs. I'm not going to spend our time reading it one by one. You can go through. Also, as I'm going to inform you at the end of the webinar, you are welcome to send an email and ask for the PowerPoints. So this webinar is interconnected with the previous webinar. It's not required that you have attended the previous webinar, but it is related to the main logic of developing conformity assessment bodies confidence and building trust with the markets. The previous webinar last month explained why accreditation, although is the foundation of laboratory confidence, the true credibility comes from the continuous demonstration of technical competence, reliable data, integrity, and consistency. So, previous webinar was mainly applied to laboratories, but this month, our webinar is extending to cover all conformity assessment bodies. So the ultimate product of a conformity assessment body is not to achieve only accreditation, but is to build confidence and credibility in the market. And this is directly also related with what is the title of today's webinar about the cost of accreditation. What is really the cost of accreditation? So for conformity assessment bodies, before we give the answer to the main question, the main deliverables are reliable technical decisions, competent evaluations, even if they're doing testing, if they're providing inspection, product or personnel certification, issuing accurate reports and certificates, be impartial in their conformity assessment activities, and build confidence in the marketplace. So each one of these deliverables has an associated cost, but the lack of the quality is the real center of the cost. So the ultimate question is not how much is the cost of accreditation, but what does poor quality, lack of quality costs to conformity assessment bodies. In order to be sincere with you, the idea of this webinar was built in one very old but very famous book, principle actually, which is called Quality is Free. And the question is, really, is quality free? Are quality costs inevitable? So all this idea came to me many, many years ago. It was actually on the 1980s that as young professional at that time, I was visiting Quality Expo in Chicago at Rosemont Center, which is very close to the airport, to O'Hare. And that time in Quality Expo, I had the big opportunity and luck to attend a webinar, not webinar at the time, a real seminar, provided by Philip Crosby, one of the gurus in quality management, who presented about cost of quality. And actually, I even still have the book. You see the cover on my presentation, a book that he was giving away that during the seminar. So during the seminar, he was asking questions, and if you had you giving the correct answer, he was giving out this book. This specific book is a very famous book, and I'm so lucky to have it, unfortunately, without his signature and without a dedication. The whole idea of cost of quality is that there are two main costs: the cost of conformance, the price of conformance, and the price of non-conformance. And when we say price of conformance, we mean the investment which is made to prevent problems from happening in the first place. And it doesn't matter if it is a conformity assessment body or a regular organization. Every organizational structures, whenever there is a problem, a non-conformance, we have the price of conformance, and all the costs will do to avoid non-conformities is the price of conformance. So yes, quality costs are inevitable, but failure costs are not. And remember that, because failure costs we can avoid. If you are still interested to read the source material and the base of the thinking I'm going to present you, this old book that was issued in 1979, I think that it is still available in Amazon, in the market, and you can still find it. So what is the cost of quality? To make it very simple, we have the cost of poor quality and we have the cost of good quality. So the cost of poor quality affects internal and external costs resulting from failing to meet requirements. Every time we fail to meet a requirement, what cost was mentioned as non-conformity, there is a cost. What is the cost of good quality? The cost of good quality is the cost for investing in the prevention of non-conformances and the cost for appraising a product or a service for conformance to requirements. So if we're inspecting, we're doing quality control in order not to release a non-conforming product or service in the market, this is a cost of good quality, to achieve good quality. So why now, and I'm going all the way to the top level of an organization, the conformity assessment body executives care about the cost of quality. And why I do go to the executives, of course, everybody in a conformity assessment body and in an organization in general should care about the cost of quality, but mainly it is the top management who is always fully responsible, and it is the top management who is reporting to shareholders, if there are shareholders, about the profitability or not of the entity they are managing. So today's operational environment presents many challenges. Challenges that the top management of every conformity assessment body has to face. And the first and most common challenge is competition. And it can be international competition or local competition. So for conformity assessment bodies that they offer their services globally, it is international, but there are also conformity assessment bodies just offering the services in one region or one country, and then the competition is local. So there is the pressure to reduce prices. The pressure comes from the clients, of course, okay, and from the competition. And in addition to that, the clients also have higher expectations. So they want the best possible conformity assessment service in the minimum possible price. The turnaround times many times become very short. You have to reply to client request in very short turnaround times. We have many technological changes, many new standards, new equipment, new instrumentation, and this becomes even worse with the digital transformation we are facing in our days. Increased regulatory scrutiny in many regions and in many fields. Regulators are very tough, and the requirements becoming more and more increased. And we have also the accreditation of the conformity assessment bodies with continuously evolving accreditation standards that they become more and more demanding. Even this year, 2 new standards were issued, 17020 and 17024, with increased requirements. And every year ISO is updating, ISO Casco is updating the standards, and we have new releases of the new conformity assessment requirements through the standards. So all this increased emphasis on competence, impartiality, on competitiveness, updating with the standards, updating with technology, apply many pressures to the conformity assessment bodies. So the real challenge for the top management is not only to minimize the quality costs, but in reality, I could say to optimize them. Why to say optimize? Because minimizing is wrong expression. Some costs have to be invested. The point is how to optimize. And how do we optimize the cost? By reducing the not necessary costs, the costs related to bad quality, to bad services. So what does quality mean in a conformity assessment body? I gave you earlier the more general approach about the organizational level. For conformity assessment bodies, quality extends beyond compliance. Compliance is what we do in order to achieve our accreditation. And of course, we need valid results, competent personnel, but all these are also elements of the quality of the service we offer as conformity assessment bodies. So all these obvious points on my screen, I'm not going to read one by one. It is important to build up what we consider quality. They are, practically all of them, they are included on the accreditation standards, but they are not always to the level that they will actually improve the organization, and they will establish an effective and efficient organization management system and increase the trust in the market. So yes, quality is the foundation upon which confidence is built, and accreditation is the first level to achieve or to express to the market the information, yes, that this conformity assessment body complies to the minimal requirements of quality for conformity assessment bodies, which is the requirements as expressed through accreditation standards. 17025 for labs, 17020 for inspection bodies, 17065 for product, 24 for personnel, and so on. So the next question, which is the main question of our webinar today, is, okay, all this is good, but at the end, how much does quality cost? So I can envision quality costs as an iceberg. And you know the iceberg, there is a small top that it is outside on top of the sea, and the biggest volume of the iceberg is hidden inside the sea. So this is what I call the visible costs and the hidden costs. So visible costs are the obvious costs that you will pay to maintain or achieve your accreditation, which can be train people, perform the audits, internal audits that the requirement, pay your accreditation fees. If you are a laboratory, pay for your calibration of your instruments or perform proficiency tests or inter-laboratory tests that they are required by the standard. All those have a very specific costs that they can be easily calculated because you know which one is constant. It may evolve through time, but it is constant. It is easily calculated. That's why I include all of them on the visible costs. The difficult point of the calculation is what is the invisible, the hidden cost. And those hidden costs cannot be easily calculated, and they are variable depending on the maturity of your conformity assessment body. The maturity, I mean, of the quality system and of your efficiency on working and operating in your sector. So hidden costs can include, and this is not an exhaustive list, but these are the most common hidden costs. repeated testing, inspections, whatever you do to perform your conformity assessment activity. So if something is not well done, you have to repeat it, additional cost. Appeals, if something was appeals or complaints, okay, and you have to go check back, you may have to provide the correction first, that it will be costly to do, in addition to the root cause analysis that will give you the appropriate corrective actions. So investigations, technical investigations, something is wrong, maybe the client will never understand, but you have to find out, and you spend time to do that, and you spend time to correct things. Non-conformities that they are either related by accreditation or they issued by clients during second-party audits and so on. There is cost behind non-conformity, cost to close them, cost that it can be related not only to time but equipment and so on. Lost opportunities, very difficult to calculate because of mistakes or because of lack of quality. We lose opportunities, we may lose tenders, we may lose projects that, and you never know how many you lost. So this is the most difficult to calculate. Reduced customer confidence that will reflect in losing business, okay? And if things are going dramatically wrong, you may have regulatory interference that can create even bigger problems on the organization. Staff overtime, of course, it's obvious, you spend more time to correct all of these issues. So quality has the two elements of the visible cost and the easy to calculate and the more difficult, which is the hidden cost, which is more difficult to calculate. Now, let's proceed with a more systematic approach on the cost of quality. We have four different components we have to consider. The first of them is the prevention, okay? The other is cost related to appraisal of the situation, cost related to the internal failures of our system, and external failures. So one by one is presenting in the PowerPoint. Unfortunately, I don't have time to spend explaining one by one all this table because by itself it will need half of the seminar, half of the webinar. But I would like to stay on the prevention part, which has to do with your qualifications, your trainings, method validations, risk assessment, internal audits, and competence monitoring. So when I say assessor qualification, this applies if you do inspections, product certification. If you are a lab, you will call it personnel qualifications, technicians qualification, and so on. And this is interrelated also with training. Be careful, the qualifications and the training is not the same thing. They are elements of the competence, okay? And competence is the ability to apply knowledge and skills. So you need to have different, understand this definition and cover all of the different requirements of the competence. So again, method validation, sometimes the method is given, it is a technical standard already approved, then you don't have to validate it, but sometimes you develop your own methods. Or if you are a product certification, inspection, or personnel certification body, you develop your own schemes. So in this case, the scheme, is your method, okay? So all those elements should be considered in order to calculate the components of the cost of quality. Appraisal, the category of appraisal, explains everything it has to do with identifying and measure issues related to quality. And this can be technical reviews, it can be participation in proficiency test or in the laboratory comparisons, if you are a lab, okay? It can be calibration of your instrument, verification of your methods. It can be review and records of your records, internal controls and so on, if you are not a lab, for example, and so on. Internal failures is everything it has to do with collapse of a small part or a larger part of your system. And it can be different errors related to scheduling, relating to performance of your activities, certificates, wrong certificates, issued wrong certificates, test reports, corrective actions you need to take. So all of these internal failures and external failures are problems related to external context of the organization, that it could be problems or complaints generated through clients, appeals, reputation damage, regulatory interference, and so on. About these regulatory actions, I personally have experience of cases that the regulator was, after the poor quality of the service provided by conformity assessment bodies, we have regulatory interference, check, controls. I know even situations that regulators stopped the operation of conformity assessment bodies, of labs not performing according to standards, and that could be catastrophic. Not only because you lose the business of the projects you could have the time that you are closed or stopped or whatever, but because the reputation, the damage on the reputation of the conformity assessment body can be critical, can be very significant. So we have to be very attentive of the external, of the possibilities of external failures. So next step is prevention costs. Very important, because this will be there as a cost, but this will reduce the cost of correction, which is always much larger, and many times it cannot be calculated. And the prevention costs are also can be divided in 4 main categories. The first category is about people, which has to do with building on their competence, evaluating their competence, and do that on a continuous manner. So, because as we told, technology changes, standards are updated, new instruments are coming in, we have to be sure that our staff is always competent and in position to perform their duties on the highest level of quality. And I explain on my slide how to achieve that. Then costs related to processes, and this has to do with method or scheme. As I mentioned, validation and verification, development of the appropriate procedures, risks, opportunities, internal audits, and management reviews. We see all these tools that all of you that you are accredited will recognize it. You'll say, okay, but this I cover in accreditation. But in accreditation, you cover it as the minimum to the minimum level. For example, I am visiting a lab and they say, what method you use? Oh, we use only standard methods. This is the standard AESTM, whatever, BS, whatever. This is the standard. We follow that. And you go to another lab and say, yes, we follow standard methods, but we have developed a nice SOP, a process that emphasizes on the important steps. So every time our staff does not have to spend time reading again and again the standard, especially for standards that they are not very performed not so oftenly. But we have a very simplified flowchart and SOP that describes the process. Now, both of them are fine. As an accreditor, I cannot say, oh, why you use a standard. I cannot say you don't have SOP. I don't have that. You don't have to have an SOP. But when you improve your process and you want also to be efficient and to use your timely efficient and reduce the probability of cost, it is more intelligent, let's say, to develop a very nice, intelligent flowchart to map your process, that it can be fully described very well in a 70 pages standard. So I don't say you cannot use both. So for accreditation, both will be acceptable, but the efficiency is improved through an intelligent and a clever approach on how to perform your processes. So this is the additional value that the extra step will add in your management system, even if you have achieved your accreditation through the standard compliance with the typical standardized processes, as described in the standard, I mean the technical standard. Resources then. Resources is not about people here only, it is also all the available resources you need to perform in an appropriate manner. It has to do with equipment, it has to do environmental issues, monitoring of your environment, of testing, calibration, digital and security issues, all these that they are supporting the performance of your services. And finally, something more difficult to describe is culture. Although the standards, the accreditation standards, they say that you have to have the appropriate mentality and dedication and so on. This is something very difficult to quantify. Quality awareness, leadership commitment, continual improvements, lessons learned. All this is something that it is your extra effort to introduce the quality in your system that it will make it to be there. So in many cases, I go to many assessments and they say, oh, we don't have any non-conformities from clients, internal non-conformities, we don't have anything. We perform our internal audits and all findings are zero. We don't have issues. We don't have complaints. We don't have appeals. We don't have corrective preventive actions. We have nothing. Okay, you cannot force them to have, because all these elements are elements that they may come or may not come. But the true quality culture means that you will not avoid them. You will not hide the dust under the carpet, but whenever there is a problem, you will expose it and you will handle it. And this is not something that I can push you as an accreditation body, except if I identify something that you didn't identify. But because my time is limited during the accreditation assessment and my sampling is small, I may lose many situations of potential problems that you could identify and you didn't. But this is your culture and your mentality that it has to do it. Because always remember, any problem, an issue you identify and you resolve in advance, it will not come back as a larger problem that it will be identified and exposed by the client or by the regulator, even worse. And then the cost could be very high and many times very difficult to cover it. So the improvement culture, the quality culture is something you build internally. It starts from top management, because if the top management does not understand it, they will never transfer it to the rest of the company. But it is a critical parameter to achieve a higher level of quality and conformity assessment service. Now, I would like to emphasize on the appraisal costs, because the appraisal costs sometimes are not very easily understood. Again, in appraisal costs, we have three categories as I define on this slide: technical activities, performance monitoring, and management activities. And all of these different categories include the tools you need to verify that the level of quality you want has been achieved. So if you want to be accredited, what accreditation you will mean automatically when you achieve accreditation? That you have achieved the minimum level of required appraisal processes to comply to the standard. But for many of them, as I explained before, in the culture, in the management culture, there are more steps, more higher steps you have to follow. And depending of the type of conformity assessment bodies, different activities, monitoring or management activities methods may apply. Again, here on this table, you will find some of them for different types of conformity assessment bodies. All these elements here will help you to answer to the question, have we achieved the expected level of quality? Because you set the level of quality higher than the standard. The first level of quality is set by the accreditation standard. 17 on 25 for labs, 20 for inspection, and so on. But above that, you set the level of quality you want to achieve, and you measure it through these tools, the appraisal tools, as I call them. Now, the next PowerPoint I present you has to do with the internal failure costs. Because up to now, all the elements are elements to avoid problems. So if you implement whatever I told you up to now, you will avoid the problems. But what it could be the internal failure costs? I gave you some examples at the beginning. I'm not going to repeat them. Many of them are repeated here. But here I categorize that in different conformity assessment bodies. So for labs, inspection bodies, certification, and certification can be management system, can be personnel, can be product certification, and then some that they are common to all conformity assessment bodies. So once again, I will not go one by one. I will leave that as a homework for you to do it after the end of the presentation, and go to the appropriate column to your conformity assessment bodies and think about it. There are different types of internal failure cause. The common, I will start with, I will emphasize in some common that it is the root cause investigations. This is a very weak point that we address during the accreditation assessments, that whenever there are some problems, there is a very, as I can say, surface level root cause investigation analysis. You just try to write something on your non-conformity report just to say that you did, but you never really investigate in depth what is the root cause of the problems. And most of the times, the corrective actions are not corrective actions, but they are corrections. And it is our duty as accreditation, through the findings, to indirectly train you the difference between correction and corrective action, and the need to perform real root cause analysis, root cause investigation, and resolve the issue. Why resolve the issues? Because the cost, the hidden cost of quality is exactly there, to identify the problems, the roots of the problems, and correct them so they will not repeat. So this is not something about only the accreditation, but this is something about you saving money. Every time that a non-conformity comes back and you have to close it, you have to resolve it, you spend time, you spend resources, you spend money. So the root cause analysis will is not only an adequate requirement to satisfy your clients, providing them competent technical services, but also it is a great tool for you to reduce your costs. So it is really very important. Similarly, other issues like overtime, corrective actions, process interruptions, and so on are issues that we find on all different categories of conformity assessment bodies, and they need your attention. It is important to remember that finding an error internally is always preferable to having a customer discovering it. And that is why when I go to assessments, many times I see people that they are not very comfortable, they have anxiety during the accreditation, and I told them, guys, don't worry. As an accreditation body, and this is the mentality of our accreditation body at PJLA, don't worry. We are not here to create problem to you. We're here to resolve issues that the client can find. So don't worry if we issue non-conformities. Don't worry if you get, I could say, many non-conformities from your accreditation body. This means that if you correct them, these issues will not be discovered by your clients because they will not be there anymore. So if there are non-conformities in your system, it is better to identify it in advance before your customers identify them or the regulator. So you pay the accreditation body a significant amount, use it. And if there are non-conformities, don't worry about them. Don't try to hide them. Be happy. Don't be happy because you have non-conformities, but be happy that these issues are discovered before your customers discover it. And the same mentality should you apply in your internal audits. Your internal audit should not be just wasted time because it is required by the conformity assessment standard, because it is required by the accreditation. Internal audit is a very strong improvement tool, and train your people. We had another webinar you can attend, how to be audited and how to develop this mentality. You can go back in our YouTube channel and find it out, where I train you on how to accept an audit and how to think about the audit. So either it is internal audit, it is accreditation audit. Don't worry about the number of non-conformities. Of course, you should worry if there are many, but not because they are discovered. You should worry if there are many non-conformities because your system is not strong enough. But the more non-conformities we identify, the more opportunities we have to resolve them if we do an adequate root cause analysis, and the less problems will remain, and the company will be better, and the customers will never discover them, not because we are hiding them, but because they are not existing anymore. So you've been a better organization. So the external failure costs I mentioned before, they also have their own components: customer impact, they have operational impact, they have regulatory impact, and they have business impact. Already I touched many of those elements. I told you, for example, on regulatory impact, you don't want government scrutiny. You don't want to be suspended or to have issues, because this will reflect in the market. This will reflect on your reputation. This will reflect on your business in total. This is the worst case scenario, okay? That you have a regulatory intervention. But also, customer is a big problem, not because the customers are good. We like them. They bring business. But I say customers discovering our problems. That's why I told you in the previous slide, not hide the problems so they will not discover them, resolve the issues so there will be no issues to be discovered by the clients. And of course, the problems are not only with the regulators, the problems are not only arising with customers, but also internally, that create many costs, spending time, wasting time, confusing our staff, additional work that we want to avoid. And all of this generally will impact our reputation as a conformity assessment body. So building up a good name, accreditation, as I told in my last month webinar, is your first step. Building up reputation, building up confidence, and trust in the market is a long-term, many-step effort that is built by time and is built by conscious mentality and action of a company organizational culture that is working towards this direction. So, lessons learned. Common sources of problems, okay, of quality in conformity assessment bodies. 4 categories again: technical factors, process factors, leadership factors, organizational results. Most of them already explained through my presentation, but now grouped on a different way. The result. What we want. We want to avoid lack of competence. We want to avoid the poor technical reviews, problems with equipment, problem with people, and so on. We want to avoid the weak processes. Okay. We want to have leadership that understands the culture I just explained in my previous slide. And we want to avoid in general the cost of poor quality and keep customers not satisfied and have reduced quality, which means reduced profitability and competitiveness for our conformity assessment bodies. We want to reduce the risks and be careful here. 17, 25, 24, 65, all the conformity assessment standards, they are asking you to identify risks related to the operation, but they don't ask you to identify your business risks as a business. They are just checking on the level of competence, because this is the primary priority of the standards related to conformity assessment. But there is one more step, the business risks. And these business risks should be identified. So what will be the effect on the client? What will be the effect on our reputation? Of poor quality, of course, okay, of poor service. What will be the effect on regulators? How the regulators can interfere and affect us? All these issues, they can be included, of course, on your risk analysis under 17.25, but they will not be required 1702.5 clearly says, identify the risks related to impartiality, and then on clause 8, identify risks related to the operations, technical operations, and competence, but the business risks are not clearly required. And this is the additional step that I am expecting, not as an assessor, but as client more from the market, from a mature conformity assessment body, from a conformity assessment body that is looking farther than the minimum requirements of accreditation standards. So although the goal is not perfection, and we have to understand that perfection cannot be achieved 100%, we are always moving toward perfection, but it is not possible to touch it. Our goal is what? Our goal is to create an organizational culture that consistently learns, improves, and prevents recurrence of the problems. So all this preventive approach that I already mentioned many times in my webinar today is to reduce the hidden costs and avoid the costs of non-conformities, which is the real cost of quality. So the real cost of quality is not how much you will pay for accreditation or to calibrate your instruments, but it is all the errors and mistakes that you will do if you don't pay attention building up an efficient and effective management system. Now, prevention versus failure. I mentioned many examples. I believe that this slide, it just makes a summary of all of them. What we are expecting, where to invest. Of course, you will invest on calibrations and everything, as I say, the obvious cost, but invest in the competence of your people, so you have fewer technical errors. Invest in the method of the validation of your methods if you don't using standards, verified standards, and schemes. Invest in witness assessment, internal audits, okay? Increase your confidence on the quality of your system, on the good operation of your processes, of your people, of your instruments. Invest in in-depth and appropriate risk management. Include on your risk analysis not only the minimum risks required by the accreditation standards, but also business risks that they may create even bigger problems and cost to your organization. Invest on sincere management reviews. You know, for me as an accreditation assessor, it is very easy to understand if a management review record is just something that you completed in 5 minutes just to justify the standards. But this requirement is not to satisfy me as an accreditor. This requirement is about you, to identify issues that you could avoid hidden costs, issues of improvement, and weak points on your operations. So at the end, leadership, and this is about leadership again, should continuously wonder which failures occur most frequently in my company. Do you have that? Or you just have a feeling? I know that you have a feeling. I know that if you are managing an organization, you have a feeling what is going usually wrong. But are you sure that this is the case? Did you document? Did you measure it? Not because the accreditor is asking, but because you would like to have a very clear understanding of what issues going wrong more frequently. And then which prevention activities would reduce them. But if you don't measure and you don't classify them and qualify them, how you will know the appropriate preventive actions that work? And what is the final return on your investment? You will get a number from the accounting department about that, but the accounting department will indirectly measure your costs, but it cannot measure issues like your branding, recognition, regulatory problems, and so on. So conformity assessment bodies that underinvest in prevention, they spend much more resources on correcting problems. So again, once again, the real cost of quality comes from correcting problems. So, interesting slide on how to measure the cost of quality as a conformity assessment bodies. I interrelated with measuring the 4 groups that I presented you before related to the costs of quality. So, prevention, appraisal, internal failures, and external failures. The difference of this slide to the previous ones is on what the previous slide it presented, it defined all these categories. Here, I am proposing you to use specific tools that they are provided by 17020 series of standards, 25, 20, and so on, but also tools that exist there. They are not required probably by the standard, but they are easily accessible from you. So please go through. No time to explain one by one, but they are very trivial and very obvious. What I suggest to you is use this table as your tool when you will start your improvement process. If you start any improvement process after my presentation, that hopefully it will ring some bells. So this slide is very important. It provides you tools, and you may wonder, okay, how I'm gonna measure internal failures? How I'm gonna measure prevention-related activities? Here it is. Always remember, you cannot improve something if you don't measure it, okay? The type of management based on feelings and, oh, I know everything, it never happened to our company, it's nonsense. Sorry for the expression, okay? You have to take decision based on facts. And in order to have facts, you need to measure. And measure not only number of non-conformities or measure time taking to perform a test or whatever, but measure and identify many different points that in total can give you a wide understanding of what goes wrong or what goes good in your organization. And this table helps you to prevent problems. Now, be careful, you may ask me, is that all? No, it's not all. This is just an example. These are some elements you may measure to develop some cost of quality data. It is not all. Depending on the nature of your conformity assessment body, depending on your market, the context you are operating, you can add many more and improve this tool. This PowerPoint now, it has to support the previous one. The previous one gave you the elements of cost of quality. Here, I give you even exact quality performance indications, KPIs, that you can use to identify your cost of quality, okay? Again, is that all? No. Those are typical examples. Is that you may not use something, it does not apply to you, or you have an alternate tool, but those are typical KPIs you can measure to start understanding the progress of your quality of the service and the improvement of your organization. Important. Those quality indicators and the quality indicators in general should measure your organizational performance, not merely compliance. For the compliance, we have specific tools. So if, for example, your testing is appropriate and the results are correct, or your instruments are working in an appropriate way, or so on, we have specific tools. So don't confuse the organizational improvement and performance to compliance. Compliance is the minimum. It is included on the organizational performance. And this is actually that we are looking as accreditation bodies, so you understand that as accreditation bodies, we are checking your compliance. But improvement, organizational performance, is something bigger. And this is what I'm talking about now. Now be careful. Many times we are confusing some of the KPIs, for example, number of non-conformities, and you say we want less non-conformities. Be careful on targets like this. What I say is measure the number of non-conformities, but don't say that you have to set a target to reduce 10% your non-conformities. This target is nice if you are sure that you are 100% sincere and you are sure that all your staff is well trained, because it may become a boomerang. In order to satisfy your goal, if you say decrease the number of non-conformities 10% every year, in order to catch the goal, departments will hide non-conformities. So this is very critical. Many of these KPIs are based on the logic of sincere implementation. So I could say, if I am not sure or my system is not mature yet, I will set a target to follow up the number of non-conformities, but I will not apply a target reduce a specific number of non-conformities every year if I'm not sure that my system works in a very mature way. So if I'm new in this improvement process, I will set the KPIs, but as top management, I will not push my people in many of them to go every year lower. So if there are non-conformities, and if there are more non-conformities than last year, so be it. So it's not a lack of a quality objective to have more non-conformities if the target is to have less. It's not a failure, because if I don't identify the non-conformities, how am I going to correct them? So be careful the type of KPIs you are using. Not all KPIs are appropriate to reduce every year, but it is required and appropriate to measure them continuously. Of course, as your system matures, you will see also that the number of non-conformities will decrease by time, not because you hide them, not because you don't measure them, but because you're becoming better. But let it come with time. Don't push it. That's my point. I would like to emphasize on setting KPIs. So, accreditation as a business investment. Many organizations ask, what does accreditation cost? And definitely, it's not only what you pay to accreditation body. I could rephrase this question to what value does accreditation create? If accreditation gives you the opportunity, I could say, to start thinking about all these elements of hidden costs and use the tools of accreditation to be better, then all the money you pay for accreditation, you get them back. If you just use the accreditation for a frame in the wall, and all the improvement tools that are included in the accreditation process are just there, sitting without anybody really using them, then yes, accreditation is creating a cost, and this is the cost related to the accreditation body or related to proficiency tests that they are required by the standard in the laboratory that you never care because you believe that you're perfect and you don't want really to improve and all these things. So this then becomes a burden. But if you use the accreditation as the first step towards increasing your competitiveness and reducing your hidden costs, then all the costs, as I say, of the accreditation will reflect through the business improvement, through your increased competitiveness and the less mistakes and errors. So accreditation, after all, is an investment in confidence and not a certificate in the wall, which is very important to understand when you are developing this improvement culture. Now, in order to build this culture that will provide you this vision, let's say, that I described to you today, you will need some steps, some characteristics. And everything starts from leadership. So leadership has to understand the target of this culture and transfer it to the people. And then the people will transfer it to the process, performing appropriate processes to achieve the required quality, which will build at the end the confidence. Confidence first to yourself, and then to your clients, and then the market, the regulators, and so on. So quality culture is much stronger form, I could say is the strongest form of risk management. So whatever risk management you do, if you don't have the quality culture, it will be just words on paper or minimal requirements that are there to satisfy the accreditor and so on. So use this tool I am presenting here to build up the culture and start from your management. Many years ago, when I was in the consulting market before I entered in conformity assessments, and I was telling to my clients in my consulting project, the first step is to do training, not to the people. I want to do training to the management. I say, oh, our management is busy and so on. You say, okay, if you don't want, don't do it. But my suggestion is start with training of your top management. Try to build first the quality structure on your top management and then extend it to the lower levels of your organization. So if you say, okay, give me a practical rule of thumb, what to do about quality costs to improve my quality, okay? To start this change process, what I have to do? First, identify your largest quality costs. And I gave you tables, many categories, depending on your field, what type of conformity assessment body you are, what type of service. Identify your largest quality costs. Don't try to identify all of them. Use the Pareto logic. What is the Pareto logic? That 60% or 80% of the problems can be identified of 30 or 40% of actions. Try to identify your largest quality costs and start working with them. Quantify the cost of poor quality, okay? As I told you, and I gave you examples at the beginning of my presentation, the regular costs, accreditation, calibration are obvious, but the hidden costs are the cost of poor quality is difficult to identify. Start working on that. Invest in prevention before failure occurs. If you identify your sources of poor quality, then you can work on them. Do preventive actions before anybody is asking for it. Don't wait for accreditation, don't wait for clients or everybody. Start doing it yourself. Develop the meaningful for your conformity assessment body quality KPIs. Review quality performance during management reviews. And if you have many problems, don't say, oh, the standard says one management review per year. I will do one per year. Do as many as you need. If you feel that you are weak on some areas, do management reviews just for these areas. So use this tool on an appropriate way for your conformity assessment body and treat accreditation as a tool for you. You pay so much money for accreditation, use them. Use the accreditation body to identify also problems and help you improve. Improving quality does not require revolutionary change. It requires intelligent thinking and culture and dedication. Okay, so in order to conclude, the cost of quality is not simply an accounting exercise. It is a strategic management tool. For conformity assessment bodies, investing in competence, impartiality, and robust technical processes shifts resources away from failures and towards sustainable confidence, operational excellence, and long-term business success. The cost of poor quality now is not an abstract accounting concept. It directly affects profitability, operational efficiency, customer confidence, and accreditation outcomes. My closing remark for today. The true product of a conformity assessment body is confidence, trust, as I say. Every investment in competence, impartiality, consistency, and continual improvement strengthens that confidence, reduces the cost of poor quality, and creates lasting business value. So after this webinar, when you return to your office, ask yourself, not how we can reduce our quality costs, ask how can I reduce our cost of poor quality. The answer to that question may become one of your organization's greatest competitive advantages. So thank you very much for your attention today. I would like to note that, as I mentioned before, the PowerPoints are available to any of you would like to have a copy, as long as you will send an email either to me, and my email is here. You can see it now on your screen, or to the organizer on the page that you registered, and we will be happy to provide you a copy of the presentation. I believe that it was helpful. I want to check on the question and answers area if there are any questions. I don't see any questions. I see some good words. Thank you very much for your good words. I hope it helped, and I hope to see you in one of our next webinars. I also want to remind you that all the webinars after a few days are available in YouTube. So visiting PJLA website, go to resources, and then you will go to webinars, and then you will see the link to YouTube. So if you want some of your associates to share our webinars, or you want to go back in one of our previous webinars, please access our YouTube channel and you will find everything over there. Once again, thank you very much for your attention, and we will be together on the next webinar. Take care, everybody. Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, wherever you are all over the world.